I learned a lot about chairing a meeting this morning at the breakfast, so everyone's in trouble. The gavel was a knife. So I guess we are ready to take roll.
Regent Christian.
Here.
Regent Hamilton. Here. Regent Bornpaul. Here. Regent Barrett. Here. Regent Buchanan. Here. Regent McLean. Here. Regent Robinson. Here. Commissioner Stearns. Here. Is someone here representing the governor's office? Not yet. Oh, okay. And Denise Juneau, Superintendent Juneau, is not here yet.
Yeah, there's representation there.
Who?
Joyce is here.
Hi, Joyce.
All right. We have posted in our agenda the minutes from our conference call a couple weeks ago. If we could have a motion to approve those.
So moved.
We have a motion to approve our minutes as posted. Is there any corrections or additions or changes to those? If not, all those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Minutes are approved. Daniel Bingham.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, we'd like to welcome you here to Helena. We're excited that you're here, and we hope that the next couple days will be a very productive meeting for each of you and for those who are in attendance. A couple of logistical items that we just make you aware of. First off, we want to welcome our new regent to the board, Major Robinson, and we appreciate his diligent service. So thank you for being here and for your first meeting. The most important thing that we generally tell people, the bathrooms are down the hall, they haven't moved, they're in the same place, so if you've been here, you know what they're at, but down the hall to the right and the left. Tonight's reception at 5:30, from 5:30 to 7. Each of you, I believe, were sent a map. If you do not have them, we have other maps we will hand out on how to get to the airport campus. I'll remind you that it is right next to the airport. That's one of the reasons why we call it the airport campus. We are still slightly under construction, but everything will be ready to go, and I believe we'll have a great reception tonight. The actual reception will be in the aviation hangar, and so we'll have a table set up for displays, and of course a couple airplanes for those who want to get in and fly around the inside of the hangar. We'll try to get that working for you also. You should have documentation on your table there on how to get into the network. If any of you are having problems, we have several individuals over here that will be glad to help you out. Just give us a high sign and we'll come over and get that taken care of for you. The lecture hall, which is right down the hall here to your right, is open for any of those who would like to have a private place to meet, confer, or make phone calls or anything else. The whole campus is wireless, so you should be able to go anywhere and be connected. Shouldn't have any problem there. And I believe that's also where we'll be having luncheon with students and faculty, staff, and such in the future. I know we have a lot of things on the agenda, but so without any further ado, we'll say welcome to Helena, to the campus. We're glad to have you here. Our students are very eager to showcase their campus, and if there's anything we can do to help you out, please let me know. Thank you.
Dean Bingham, thank you. Thank you for having us and hosting this meeting. We know it's a bit of a challenge. We refrain from saying burden when we come to town, but we appreciate your hospitality. Couple thoughts, the first of which was going to be to introduce our newest member, but I believe we've done that. Do you want to say anything, or are you ready to roll?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I want to thank all of you for the warm welcome, and as I've heard already, because I've been on a call with the Board of Regents, it's time to get to work, so let's get to work.
We were saying at breakfast he had all the answers, and President Engstrom said at this point he doesn't have the confusion of the facts yet. So. later today, we are going to offer a press release which will address our enrollment. I have a copy of it here. Again, just another amazing year for the Montana University system. The highlights of this press release will show again an increase of 4% over last spring. Total FTE now is 37,497, which again is a record by quite a bit, almost 48,000 full-time students. Since 2009, an additional 4,500 students, which is an 11% increase. And student enrollment from 2009 to 2011 is greater than the previous 15 years of growth in the system. So certainly facing an interesting time for growth. Educating students is 100% what we're about, and so we're thrilled with the growth. Although as board members and members of this audience, it presents some certain logistical challenges, and that ends up back in the lap of funding higher education, and we certainly have lots of new students. Our budget was built on a head count in 2006, so we're probably in the 5,000 or 6,000 students beyond that. So there's challenges in front of us. We continue to be at the legislature. Our staff does day in and day out advocating for full funding of the governor's budget. The commissioner is going to go over some spreadsheets, which we had this morning, which will show that budget, although enrollment is increased, is a fairly flat line from us. I think our campuses have done an amazing job making do with fairly flat budgets and fairly flat tuition in light of incredible growth. We'll continue to do that. We're committed to doing that, but that is a significant challenge. The tuition continues to be something that comes up. As you all know, this board, I think, has been extremely committed to access and affordability, and we continue to say we will remain committed to that. We're in a difficult spot right now. We need to see that the governor's budget is fully funded, or we've got some choices, and those aren't easy ones to make, and tuition is not where I think any of us want to go. There's also been way too many questions in my mind about, well, if we don't fully fund the governor's budget, will that be a tuition increase? Well, I don't think that's, that, as you all know, that's only 40% of the question, even if we were willing to address that. The tuition, we have 100% of a budget to take care of. Trying to make up holes in the state funding with tuition dollars, which only amounts to 40% of our funding, is really just a battle. I don't see how we can climb. So we'll continue to work and have our staff work to see that the governor's budget is fully funded. We hope in the next month that there's progress on that. In light of that situation, which all we can do is advocate and have very little control of, we will continue to do the best we can to serve not only the existing students of the Montana University system, but all the new students. The other comment I would make is I was struck this morning at breakfast as we went around the room and received questions and answered questions, just how interconnected all of it seems to be. We'd answer one question and it would lead to another, but it was tied back to the earlier one. And I think that is really a P20 concept, one that I think this board has done a good job addressing, but and one that our staff has done an excellent job addressing, but I think one that we need to continue to remind ourselves and our staff to keep in the forefront. It's just amazing, the question about debt or affordability, and then you get back to, well, where does dual enrollment fit in? And dual enrollment helps with remediation rates, and it helps with affordability, and it helps with cost of education and debt in the end, and time to degree, and it's just all so intertwined that we need to continue to put it at the top of our priority list, that we're committed to a P20 concept, and we're working to that end. It ultimately very much serves the students. With that, we will move the meeting on. I welcome everybody and appreciate you all being here for this regular scheduled meeting of the Montana Board of Regents. Commissioner Stearns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to begin by thanking both my staff, Lynette and Summer, and they know the names of the technical folks. I'm just going to look at all of them, and on Daniel, on your staff. Please convey our thanks to them. We'll thank them again at the end, but we know that this is a particularly complicated meeting in the middle of a legislative session. Your staff does an unusually great job of setting all this up for us, and we look forward to this evening. And we really appreciate all the extra work. You make it look easy, and we know it isn't. Members of the board, we'll go to legislative update, and if you're pacing yourself in terms of how this works, we wanted to leave quite a bit of time for this legislative update, as well as the campus issues and reports, and the WWAMI Native American Service Learning. It will be a small section, but we do have some students here to hear from as well. And I anticipate, it's a guess, but I anticipate, Mr. Chairman, that you may want us to have a break along about 5 to 10 or so, and then reassemble at 10:15 to stay on schedule. Okay. But we did allow enough time for the legislative update. I know that Mr. Villa said he couldn't be here with as busy as he is for the whole time. He wanted to be here to help us with the reflections on what's happening so far in the legislative part. So we'll launch right into that, and members of the board, I want to be sure that you are feel as comfortable asking questions as the Appropriations Committee did yesterday, because they asked a lot of good questions. And I do want to call on my colleagues, the presidents, but also Jane and Jim and Joe and Frank and others who were there yesterday, to feel free if you have an observation if you're not close to a mic, you've got your tables have mics, to just wave so that you catch someone's eye up here to help engage in that conversation. I think that Kevin McCrae has made sure that most people have several handouts, and I'll touch on them fairly quickly. The one handout just has a list of the bills a bunch. I mean, as some of you know, we track anywhere upwards of 100 and 150 bills during a session. Some of them are very peripheral to us, but especially Kathy Swift and Jessica Brubaker, our legal counsel, and others, keep an eye on them or quickly send them to the campuses, and they take a look to see if we're affected. And if so, if we can provide some input to either make it better legislation or to make sure that it isn't problematic. So we'll spend most of our time today on the top 3 on the list, which is General Appropriations, House Bill 2, House Bill 13 and House Bill 439 have both had their hearings and are just, at the moment, sitting in appropriations while they work through 2. So if the next piece of paper I would like us all to look at is the one a number of you have seen that has blue bars on it. And I may have given away all my copies, but I think I know it by heart. Here's one. Members of the body and all those gathered, if you haven't seen it, I think there are quite a few circulating. But it does show in fairly simple terms the fact that the budget for 2010 and 2011 was fairly flat, around average $215 million of general fund and 6 mil levy. That's all in for the agencies, community colleges, and the education units. That is what we spent. And that did have stimulus funds in it. I received that question yesterday, and I received it again this morning at the community breakfast. About $18 million over the biennium, so roughly you could divide it. It wasn't exactly 9 and 9. And if you'll remember, some of you, that was called, at the time, tuition mitigation. And indeed, members of the board, that is how you allocated it. It was put into House Bill 645 and subsequently flowed to us so that you, the board, would not have to raise tuition dramatically in order to serve a growing number of students. And then if you look at what is in the executive budget for 2012 and 2013, you can see that it is, in many ways, as I tell folks across the state, a generous budget in the sense that we all worried quite a bit about falling off an $18 million cliff. And we worked on reform and reinvention, and we still work on reform and reinvention in order to tighten our belts and to be more efficient for the students and the taxpayers of the state of Montana. But nevertheless, the governor's budget did backfill the stimulus dollars so that we have a fairly steady state budget. Or we will if the Appropriations Committee and subsequently the full legislature fully fund it. The dotted line on that sheet indicates where we are as of the last time executive action was taken. And yesterday, in full appropriations, in spite of a number of amendments, no changes were made to that level at this time. Our subcommittee chair, Representative Hollingsworth, said that he would fight to get increases to that when he and his colleagues believe they have a better sense of revenue, but that remains to be seen. So that is where we are. There are cuts within that could be devastating. The community colleges, in terms of a lowering of percentage of their of the state share, have taken a particularly big hit within that, but so have a number of other areas. And I think there's a third handout that may not be available for the screen, so we'll leave the blue bars up. But some of you may have a sheet that says funding below the executive budget proposal. And members of the board, I won't go through that since not everyone has it, but it is divided into three categories. It is, of this $32 million that we're below where the executive budget, 4.3, almost 4.4 million of it are reductions below the adjusted base. That is mostly that 5% global cut amendment that was in effect assessed against all agencies right from the get-go in one of the first, perhaps the first day of subcommittee meeting. The second grouping are those areas in which we call underfunding of present law decision packages. They may have funded part of or none of some of these: the Governor's Scholarship Program, the Quality Educator Loan Forgiveness Program, educational units and agencies. That's the big one for most of our campuses at $8 million. For the community colleges, a big hit, the $2.23 million, and they only funded at this point half of what the governor and we all had requested for allocating to tribal colleges that serve non-beneficiary students. And the third category, new proposals, none of those are yet funded. That includes the dual enrollment incentive and assistance for scholarships and for helping the campuses even out tuition and funding mechanisms. The PBS, and I want to give a shout out to our PBS colleagues. They are reaching people across the state. This will be, I think, aired, I heard Sunday, our meeting. Is that right? Right. And it will still be aired. There still will be an uplink. I think there's a little bit of worry about if this uplink does not get passed. There was discussion yesterday about the fact that it was through no fault of PBS's a few years ago that they lost that uplink. So it helps meetings like this and public service and programs reach across the state. The biodiesel program at MSU Northern, and finally, the new proposal for $15 million for student success, workforce development, and significant educational initiatives within the university system. So members of the board, we're all available for questions, and this is the heart of it. But I think at this point, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to invite Dan to make some comments from his perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Stearns, the last 48 days have been very, very interesting. Luckily, students, you will be able to hunt with hand-thrown spears. We all can now light the nocks of our arrows, and we can have silencers when we hunt in case you're not good enough shot. So that was the majority of the first 48 days. So let's get into what we're doing now and actually, educating tomorrow's workforce. Yesterday, Representative Melhoff, I think, did a masterful job of proposing a litany of amendments to bring the current subcommittee actions up to what the governor proposed on December 15th. All were rejected on party line votes, and we anticipate, and based on the information we've been receiving, all amendments to all sections will be rejected over the course of the next several days in subcommittee. House Bill 2 will most likely be on the floor on Wednesday of next week, and in the Senate by the end of next week. So what you see pretty much is what you're going to get as far as the House of Representatives is concerned on House Bill 2. But the side of the equation that we're not talking about is the HJ2, the revenue estimate side. Just a point of fact, year-to-date collections between July 1 of last year and the end of February, we were 10% up. Our office is projecting that we will be 6.43% up at the end of the biennium, or at the end of this biennium, in revenue growth. The Legislative Fiscal Division is estimating we will be up 2.4%. We would actually have to have negative growth for the remainder of this year in order to make the Legislative Fiscal Division revenue estimates accurate. What does that mean? Well, the Pew Research Center put out a study last week entitled Cracks in the Crystal Ball, talking about legislative revenue estimates. And Montana is the second worst in the nation for accuracy of revenue estimates. So we are utilizing bad data to make decisions that impact us today and impact our children in K-12 and our next generation of workers in higher ed, and the last and least among us in HHS today. So we will continue to discuss revenue estimates, being intellectually honest with ourselves. The money is there, $355 million in the bank this morning. So the sky is not falling. Things are kicking up. Our Office of Economic Development is putting out factoids every day about how the economy is picking up. Just yesterday, the lumber mill in Deer Lodge hired back 24 workers. You can see the growth across the state, Stillwater Mining hiring, real estate picking up. So we know the economy in Montana is back on the move. All we're asking is that the legislature be intellectually honest with itself and not make these draconian cuts when they aren't necessary. As far as other legislative issues that we're looking forward to, we still have no idea about confirmations. We're a little behind the curve on regential confirmations as far as all confirmations for that matter. So we look forward to Regent McLean and Regent Robinson and Regent Borenpole's confirmation, and we look forward to working with all three of you for the next several years. So what I would say is wait for the Senate. Things will be moving. Frankly, it's going to boil down to those last few days. As Deputy Commissioner Robinson knows, you've been around. Day 85, we might actually get to see some progress. And in the event that we don't, in the event that we try to unwind 6 years of good work that the governor has done to fund higher ed, to fund K-12, get us out of an adequacy lawsuit, to make sure that we no longer have the highest growth rate in the nation for incarceration, to make sure that we actually fund the voter initiative passed Healthy Montana Kids and other prevention programs within HHS. Well, our response is very clear. We registered the brand last week. With that said, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Regent Barrett.
Dan, what I'm wondering, in spite of the fact that it is a very fractured crystal ball that Legislative Fiscal Division has, is the legislature statutorily bound to use those numbers, or do they have any flexibility?
Mr. Chairman, Regent Barrett, the way it works is in November, when the Revenue and Transportation Committee meets, the last affirmative vote of the RAT or the House or Senate tax committees is the standing revenue estimate. So right now, seeing as though we haven't had a hearing on HJ2, the revenue estimates from November 15th of last year, which were based on the revenue estimates from February of 2010, are the standing revenue estimates guiding the decisions on HB2 today. So we're actually making decisions based on revenues projected last February. And that is the law of the land.
Yeah, well, is there a point where they're compelled, or at least can revisit that and update those? Is there a process?
Mr. Chairman, the process is that when the House Tax Committee meets, when they take action, that will be the action to update. But until that point, that is the number that we're based on, that February 2010 number that sets the revenue estimates for today. And until there's an affirmative vote of the legislature, that's how it stands.
Thank you, Mr. Will. Any other questions? Okay. Commissioner Stearns.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if there are no questions, is there any advice from the members of the board?
I don't know if there's advice, but I really do think we all need to start focusing on the notion that if they don't fully fund the governor's budget, tuition can fix that. Somehow they've forgotten the piece that we may have to raise tuition to fix the tuition side of the balance sheet. To use tuition to fix the state side of the balance sheet is a doubling of the hit that we just can't take. And I think it leaves us in a hole that we really can't climb out of, especially in light of the new students that we have. And I commented at the first hearing January 3rd, the budget is a fair budget in light of the state's economy and where we need to be, but it doesn't represent new proposals, it doesn't represent new spending, new programs. It merely covers where we're at, and a level that is less than that is going to be extremely problematic for us. Any other thoughts? Regent Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on the page that has the funding below the executive budget proposal, and that second set of things, underfunding of present law decision packages. I'm remembering at one of our earlier meetings, we talked about some kind of internal transfers of funds, for instance, from GSL that were being used to cover some of those things in that list. And so I'm wondering, given those internal funding transfers, are these numbers in addition to those, or do these numbers include those, where we're using other monies to fund those things other than general fund money?
Well, I think you're two different budget years.
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that these are general fund dollars only, so to the extent that state special isn't counted or federal special, that's on a separate sheet.
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask Regent Buchanan for a comment. He and Regent Robinson joined me last Friday with some faculty and staff and students at MSU Billings. They had good questions. They're very interested in what's happening. And I wondered if you had any observations that you could share with the others. Not that we're doing a whole set of listening sessions across the spring, but I'm hoping to do a few internal ones because of the curiosity and angst that our employees are feeling with all that's happening. But any observation, Regent Buchanan?
I appreciate Commissioner Stearns. Thank you, Chairman Christian. Yeah, 2 sessions ago was my first session as a part of this board, and a lot of the communication coming out of these dialogues was concerning to me because we as a board had not had much of an opportunity to discuss it since I had been appointed. And now that I'm watching it for the second time, I want to compliment you and your staff on the way you're managing the discussion. You're not suggesting anything's going to happen, but you're talking about the options for reaction if and when we find ourselves in a budget situation that is not fully funding the governor's proposed budget. I kind of walked away from that meeting. It was a good meeting, a lot of faculty and staff from the campus, and there's a high level of concern that I recognized, and appropriately so. The folks that work in the financial aid departments and the admissions departments, I mean, they need to demonstrate to our customers, our students, what cost is going to be, and they really do not have time. If we're waiting until May and a large change is going to occur, most of those folks are going to be pretty deep into that conversation about what the next year looks like for them, and it's an unfortunate truth of the process. And the comment that I always give when folks ask about tuition is, we really don't have any room to speculate, even discuss what reactions might be until we see what we're working with. And the truth is that's going to give these campuses such a short time to react. And again, I don't think any outcome is predictable. So, from my perspective as a member of this board and as a citizen of the state, hats off to the members of the campuses who are clearly concerned with good right as to what direction this is all going, how it's going to impact. And there is no science in any of this. And so for us to hypothesize or come up with forecast, it's inappropriate, one, but two, it's damn near impossible because we just don't know what we're going to be working with. And, from me and I suppose from us as a board, to the members of the system, thank you for your patience. I wish there were a mechanism in which we could be a little bit more accurate in forecasting what's coming, but we will quickly react as soon as final decisions are made, and thank you for your patience as you continue to watch, just as we are, with a great level of confusion as to where this process will end. Thanks, Sheila. And again, Sheila, to you and your staff, the communication coming out, reading the papers today, seeing the news releases the last couple of days, you are very appropriately reflecting my opinion and my thoughts as a board member and saying we just don't know. And we will do our best to summarize what we will be seeing summarized over the next couple of months and quickly respond so there is some direction in front of the campus's community.
Great. Thank you. Regent Robinson.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Stearns, the meeting, the listening session that was held in Billings at MSU Billings on the campus was the audience and the staff members that were there. What I observed was they're very optimistic in how things will go, but at the same time very concerned about this particular session and what type of funding would be available. So I want to echo what has been spoken this morning already, is that I think there's some true concern on their part, and that seemed to be the focus of the discussions, was what is happening here in Helena and the decisions that are made here in Helena, and what is some of the justification for the cuts. If truly indeed there is funding available, why would they have to consider cuts like this? So I think there's a real concern that I heard from them in their questions about how this is all going to transpire. So I think we do need to bring that forward and really keep that in mind, because if there isn't the funding that should be available for this particular biennium, then as Mr. Chairman had mentioned, we certainly don't want to have to consider the alternative. But at this point, in the direction that it's going, that's something that's seriously on the table with regards to tuition increases. So I think that's what I gathered from the listening session there, is there's some real concern by the staff members.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just quickly, I have 2 points. One, I have to disagree with Regent Buchanan just slightly, and given that we're in a room with some of Montana's brightest, are there any physicists in the room? Because there is science to this, and it's chaos theory. That's the legislature this time. But, Mr. Chairman, I would be remiss if I didn't touch on one other bill that is a significant portion of your budget that doesn't show up on here, and that's House Bill 13. Our state employees, including yours, have gone above and beyond for the last 2 years. We continue to outpace the nation in academic outcomes. We continue to outpace the nation in efficiencies. And our employees, it's time. It is absolutely time. The money is there. A special thank you to Commissioner Stearns and Presidents Angstrom and Cruzado. This is the first time that any of us can really remember where the university system in unison stepped up on the hearing for House Bill 13 and really gave it an extra little bit of oomph. Sitting next to Neil, I can't say enough good about the work you guys are doing. Obviously, nationwide, This is a difficult time for state employees, university system employees, but we as an administration are certainly committed to partnering with you to make sure that our employees get their due over the course of the next biennium and realize some form of raise.
Thank you, Mr. Villa, and I couldn't agree more. That's absolutely been a priority of ours from the get-go and will remain such.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Villa, and we'll just go right down to the next bill that, I've listed about a dozen of these, and again, we'll go through them very quickly, but the next one is House Bill 13, State Employee Plan. And if I may, Mr. Chair, I would like Chancellor Grotseth to comment for a moment, because in the second listening session, that was a smaller group, but I don't think Regents Buchanan or Robinson heard this question about a high level of concern from some administrative assistants on the Billings campus who thought, who raised the question, had just come from a meeting and were very concerned about their future. Would you comment about how that relates and how we discussed it, if I may?
Please.
Thank you, Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I think this kind of an atmosphere just sort of begins to breed rumor, and to the extent that we can clarify here today, that you, members of the board, and we as campus CEOs can help to quell those rumors, I think that's very helpful. It's difficult because each class of employee, when cuts are mentioned, assumes that they are going to bear the brunt, and that's just life in a large organization. And across our university system, I suspect the same is happening on each of our campuses. There's a great deal of fear, and so these next a couple of months are going to be very difficult for us as campus managers to continue to keep our employees educated and motivated.
Thank you, and my additional comment to that was, we think that what the administrative assistants had heard in their meeting was that their health insurance could go up, and of course it will. It probably will. They're beginning to hear from their own members of our inter-unit benefits committee, IUBC, and I think that is quite a terrific sort of combination, sort of regental statutory arrangement to enable labor and management to negotiate health insurance and manage our insurance and benefits plans. And what they learned is, sure, I mean, health insurance is going up, and that if they do get, I mean, if we are fortunate and House Bill 13 passes, some of their increase could get eaten up. That was the question, and I think as soon as Chancellor Grotseth was able, and those who were at that listening session, to go back to say, yes, we know about that. There's not a concerted cut, but yes, you may have, you may not get as much of a raise as you might hope for if House Bill 13 passes, because we're all aware of the challenges of the rising rate of health care in Montana and in the country. What we are proud of is the fact that the management of the self-insured plan for the Montana University System and the state plan of Montana, and the management of things such as URX, the pharmaceutical program to minimize costs there, and that has been very successful, that on both the state side and the university side is saving millions of dollars for us, for our folks. So I can see.
That's because you poached Connie.
Yeah, we poached Connie, that's right. So that's a good thing, and it's one of the things I mentioned yesterday to Appropriations when Representative Esp said, what are you doing in the university system to minimize some of the cost drivers in higher education? And of course, that is one of the cost drivers. So, go ahead.
Well, one thought, Chancellor Grotseth, to the questions you received, and I do not mean this in any way to speculate how we will find our way out of this mess, but in the economic downturn, many companies faced with smaller revenues, declining opportunities, went through the process of right-sizing their companies. Well, our right size is probably 11% larger than we have today. We I referenced it once as sort of the perfect storm in one of the hearings, but we have record enrollments. The cut prospects are nearly impossible for us to deal with, given the enrollments that we have. I agree with what Mr. Villa said. It's time. The revenue is there. We need to take care of the nearly 8,000 workers in our system. I continue to think the fight we need to fight is in the direction of how we're going to properly compensate our staff, not where we're going to cut the staff. We're well understaffed as we stand, and that doesn't seem like the option. That in itself, I'm not speculating how we solve it, but we need help from the state on House Bill 13 to properly fund our faculty, staff, and professional staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I don't want to leave House Bill 2 without calling on, I think, probably President Karras, who helped testify yesterday at the hearing, because the community colleges have a huge stake in House Bill 2, and if you wanted to make a comment on the effects of that, I know that I got a chance to visit with the Board of Trustees of Miles Community College via phone and with President Hickswa, but Jane, you were able to be there yesterday. Did you want to help advise our board of the situation for the community colleges?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Stearns, I think that as you all know, the impact to all three community colleges, and President Cargill's here as well and can speak, and President Hickswa, that it is a devastating impact to all three of us. And the original 5% reduction that was across the board from the legislature was the first cut, but then they also took in our funding formula a cut from the 50.8% state share per resident FTE that we get in our cost of education formula, went down to 45.8, which is the lowest it's been in probably since before 2000. So it's just going to be quite a devastating impact to the community colleges.
And members of the board, we will all work together with the community colleges and their boards. We're all in this together for the restoration of a 50.8 or whatever, I think that was the percentage, wasn't it, Dan, in the executive budget for the community colleges, et cetera. So we're working together very well. The community colleges have a great lobbyist in Ed Bartlett, and so we're colleagues in this. We'll run down, unless you have further questions on 2 or 13, a few more bills.
Does that include caustic comments, or?
No?
Well, I think we have to be unrelenting in what our message is. Our message is to the legislature is we want funding of the governor's budget, and anything less that would require us to make up the difference with the tuition increase is they're essentially imposing a tax on the students and the citizens of the state. They're trying to educate their people, and I don't think we can give them any slack on that. And this is supposedly a legislature that did not come here to raise taxes, and I think we need to hold them to their promise.
Hear, hear. Mick, would you take the next couple? Just House Bill 5 and House Bill 439 are somewhat linked.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, House Bill 439 is the bonding bill. This bill was brought forward by legislators, Representative Haldenbaugh from Helena and Senator Carol Williams from Missoula are the two lead sponsors of the bill. I think the impetus for bringing that bill forward was probably really the Historical Society Museum project in Helena, but along with that, they have included a number of higher education buildings projects within that particular bonding bill. Total of about $90 million. We have always made the sponsors aware of the Regents' priority list in terms of long-range building as they've worked to craft and finalize that bill. And it does have included in the bill the top priorities of the university system, the COT building in Missoula, the renovation, expansion of the science building on the Billings campus, some classroom renovation in the Bozeman campus, agriculture experiment station, funding for renovation, deferred maintenance, a new building for the Great Falls campus, and we have worked to amend the bill. It hasn't been amended yet, but to amend it for a top project on the Havre campus, the Auto Tech project. So that bill is sitting presently in Appropriations Committee. They'll probably see some action on that take place here in the next week or two in terms of getting that moving. We were supportive of the bill and will continue to be supportive of the bill, along with our strong support for House Bill 2, the governor's budget, and the pay plan bill, House Bill 13.
Go ahead, just go on down to the next one.
Okay, House Bill 5, the long-range building program, cash deferred maintenance bill, basically, with the state of the budget for the state of Montana, it doesn't have a tremendous amount of funding in it for the university system. There's about $1.4 million devoted to deferred maintenance projects, a couple of projects related to fire alarm systems and some hazard mitigation activity. That bill has, again, that's in the Appropriations Committee, and we'll probably see some final action on that take place here in the next week or two. I'm wondering if Kathy Swift, would you be interested in addressing a couple of the bills, House Bill 555 and maybe House Bill 491?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, yes, I'd be happy to. House Bill 555 is a bill that affects all healthcare insurers or plans in the state, including privates, cities, counties, school districts, and
Kathy, speak closer to the mic.
the state of Montana and the university system. And what it would do is clarify the rights of these, plans and insurance companies to coordinate benefits at the outset. So that's a matter that we've been very concerned about for the last few years since a Montana Supreme Court decision that changed the coordination of benefits rules for private insurers, and those it has kind of thrown the law into confusion. And so even though this is not our bill, we are supporting this bill. Shall I go on with 280 is our bill it's our bill. It's being sponsored by Senator Taylor Brown, and he called it the best bill in the legislature this session. It is a bill that would allow the university system to develop and implement a self-insured student health plan. And we pay, Connie Welsh would be better with the numbers on this, but we pay a 15% administrative cost to our healthcare provider for our student insurance plan. And as you will recall, we require students to have insurance. Our students pay $800 a semester for insurance if they are not, on their parents' plan or have their own insurance. So this is an affordability issue that we've been interested in some time, and it passed the Senate with, I think, only one opposing vote. So we're hoping that it will go through. We don't have immediate plans to establish such a self-insured plan. We have a contract with Blue Cross Blue Shield for the next 2 years, but it is certainly an option for the Regents and the Commissioner's Office to consider in terms of providing affordable health care insurance for students. Okay, Mr. Chairman, any questions on those? If not, I'll mention, or comments, I'll mention just a few more in passing and then see if you have questions, and if not, then we can go on to the WWAMI report. SJ 11 is the title is something like urge the Board of Regents to require post-tenure review for higher education. And I'm sure our faculty have read that and taken a look at it. We did rise in opposition to this. It is a resolution. It passed the Senate 48-2. So I think it's probably going to just sail. I stood up and opposed it as redundant. It's not a bill, or it would have been unconstitutional. But it's a resolution that uses the word, it urges the regents to take a closer look at how you conduct post-tenure review on each of the campuses. I did explain, and I thought satisfactorily, that we have post-tenure review incorporated into either policy or collective bargaining agreements or both on all of our campuses, and that while it varies somewhat, as of course collective bargaining agreements do from campus to campus, that I think that while no human institution works perfectly, and we all know of examples that where it maybe could work better, it was working. I believe President Engstrom also testified to that once we got over the fact that he was in the audience and could be called upon. There was a little bit of objection to that, and then after that, they were really glad they heard from him. But anyway, it is fine. It'll pass, and I suspect, and it'll cause us to report to a legislative interim committee of education and local government, and all of you are familiar with that committee. It's kind of a version of the post-secondary education policy budget committee of days of yore. So that'll be in August, I believe, of 2012 is what the resolution proposes. Our colleagues in MEA, MFT did rise also in opposition and caused to be struck one of the whereases that was particularly offensive. So it is what it is, and we perhaps can have some benefit in the process by getting a better picture, if you will, of what are the best practices across the system in post-tenure review. You know, some campuses may have, I mean, one of the things they said would be an advantage of this is so that they could all be consistent. Well, you know, consistency is sometimes good, maybe not so good, but best practices certainly are worth looking at. Neil, did you want to comment about that? If I may, Mr. Chair?
Commissioner and Chair, I agree with all the points you made, that we do on each of the campuses have a process that does look at that, and on our campus, University of Montana, Missoula, the collective bargaining agreement and the faculty are very involved in that and self-police that in a way that probably goes beyond perhaps what the people who introduced that legislation or resolution envisioned. And again, the comment on consistency I don't think fits necessarily with what I hear here is that each institution has somewhat of a unique mission, serves a different student body, and perhaps has a different academic mission. And so I think within that context, it's best to leave it up to each of the institutions as it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
To continue, I think I will, I'm sorry.
Regent Robinson.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Stearns, I did want to just back up a little bit on the Senate Bill 280 that we heard about. I do have one question about that. Is there a cost associated with that bill if it does indeed pass?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Regent Robinson, no, there is no cost attached to the bill. We have in the bill some options that the board could engage in terms of setting up the reserves in order that state funds won't have to be used for that. And those options include bonding for a reserve or borrowing from another university fund. That's already allowed in state law, but this would be more of a long-term loan, low-cost loan. Also, a student fee could be used. However, we've certainly taken the position that we will not look at this option unless it is a cheaper option for the student. So it would have to be considerably cheaper than the $800 per semester in order to put this option forward. And if there were a fee, of course, it would be a very small one to pay back that long-term loan to get the reserve started. So there's no state cost attached to this bill, and and certainly we have no intention of increasing the fees to students for that purpose.
Okay, thank you very much. I just was curious because in light of what we've been talking about with not having a budget that's approved at the level that we need to operate, it doesn't seem like a good idea to be looking at adding on additional fees too.
Thank you, Regent Robinson.
That was a very good question, Regent Robinson, and I would like to note that as legal counsel Kathy Swift says, she says it's our bill, but honestly, the students led this from the get-go, from inception to finding sponsor to lobbying it. They have used us for advisors, and we've been glad to help, but Janelle and others have really been the lead on this and have learned a lot about the legislative process and kind of done a really good job with it. Mr. Chairman, I think that I will skip through the rest of the list. It's sort of available of various bills that we're looking at and keeping an eye on, and just at your choice, if we want to stop on any campus issues and report, they are attached in links. If you wanted to invite any comments from the presidents or chancellors, and then we would have time for the WWAMI Native American Service Learning Project that I wanted to include as part of my report this morning.
Okay. Unless there's some objections, that's...
Mr. Chairman, just one quick comment on
Mr.
House
Bell?
Bill 520. To us, in the administration, it's somewhat awkward that we would cut scholarships, that we would cut funding, that we would look at tuition increases, and then we would have a cat and dog bill to fund some pet project for $400,000 a year. So House Bill 520 is one of those ones that we as an administration are keeping an eye on relative to these other spreadsheets, that if we don't have a fully funded university system, we should not be funding cat and dogs.
You get new meaning to ride for the brand.
Cowboy code, kill it with a spear, I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Regent Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Commissioner, I want to make sure I understood what you said correctly. On House Bill 5, the Long Range Building Program, you listed a new building at the Great Falls COT, and I'm not finding that on the list that we reviewed in May, so can you explain how that happened?
I think I can explain to a degree. Things happen. 2 words. As I said, when the sponsors of the bill showed us the draft, we pointed that out. The Great Falls project was in there and the Haver project was not. And as I mentioned very clearly, it's not our bill. We raised concerns about that, and I think that the response was to agree to add the amendment for the Haver project. Now, we went back to double check on the Great Falls project to see that it had been while it had not made the top list for the university's priorities, it had been on their master plan for several years and was, in that respect, not some project pulled out of the blue. So with that, if we had owned and controlled the bill, it probably would not be there. But did we make a federal case out of it, given that it had been in a master plan approved by the board several years past? Did we say we could live with that? We did. Judgment call. The other point I would like to make about that 439 is one that I would like all of you to attune to, faculty, staff, everyone, and that is most of the big projects in House Bill 439 that relate to the university system are not just bricks and mortar for the sake of, creating construction jobs or fancy new things on campus. They are addressing enormous deferred maintenance issues and student quality classroom issues on these campuses. And I think we have to remember that, because I know you will hear that why in this age of distance learning should there be any construction? Well, our top priority is teachers and classrooms. That's why House Bill 2 is our top priority. And our second priority, of course, is to do that well is House Bill 13. But if those are passed and sufficiently funded, then it strikes me that, and one reason I've been recommending support for 439, even if it is not perfectly aligned with the board's priorities. If we had written the bill, we would have written it slightly differently, according to the point you just made, Regent Hamilton. We didn't write it, but we did agree to support it because 90% of it does follow the board's priorities. Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? All right, then we'll.
Just a comment, and correct me if I'm wrong. Is there a threshold tied to HB 439 in terms of its funding or being able to be funded? In terms of the amount?
A revenue threshold?
Revenue thresholds?
Mr. Villa is shaking his head yes.
Mr. Chairman, the way that House Bill 439 is written, I was actually very proud of Representative Hollenbaugh. It was a brilliant move. Unless the revenue estimates are $2 million above the February 2010 revenue estimates for ending fund balance, and that's actually the first biennium worth of debt service worth, unless those revenue estimates are hit, the bonding bill is null and void. So to the extent that, and this is where another bill that's up this morning relative to the reduction in the business equipment tax comes in, that is tied to certain economic indicators. Well, one of those economic indicators is ending fund balance, which is the same economic indicator tied to the bonding bill. So if the business equipment tax reduction as proposed by Senator Tutvet and Senate tax today passes, then the business equipment tax cut kicks in, thus dragging down the ending fund balance, thus meaning you're not going to get above that 168 revenue estimate number for 439 to kick in. So yes, there is a revenue threshold, and it is, I don't know if you remember Senate Bill 100 last session that dealt with the coal board, and basically every bill in the legislature had a contingent voidness tied to it on Senate Bill 100 passing to double the coal board impact revenues. This biennium, the revenue estimates are tied in on the business equipment tax cut side, it's tied in on 439, and then obviously we need it to fund 2 and 13 as well.
Thank you, Mr. Villa. Then Commissioner Stearns, let's move to the WWAMI Native American Service Learning discussion.
Mr. Chairman, just quickly, if I could, I've got to excuse myself to get back to the chaos theory. But Pat Wise will be standing in for me for some of the day-to-day, specifically in support of MSU Great Falls nursing program. Pat has a long history with healthcare, and she's much better able to speak to that and the governor's support for that program than I will be. So thank you all.
We look forward
Stop
to
up to the
switch.
hill. I'll buy you a bad cup of coffee.
And Mr. Villa, thank you for your work with and support of, and would you please, in the interest of sort of a seamless P20 system, convey our regards. Our colleagues from OPI and K-12 are before appropriations this morning, and if our board weren't meeting, we would be there, exactly.
Yeah.
And they're a linchpin to this. I spoke with Superintendent Juneau this morning. We wish them well. Please convey that. Thank you.
Thanks.
I would like to turn to the last part of my report, members of the board, to Deputy Commissioner Sylvia Moore to call some attention to the WWAMI Native American Service Learning.
Thank you, Chairman Christian, Commissioner Stearns. We were pretty excited at the WWAMI Advisory Board meeting in December to hear about this Native American Service Learning project, and I suggested at that time that it would be a good thing to bring to the board. I think particularly in light of the fact that Indian education for all is something that we take seriously on our campuses. And cultural competency, particularly among those who provide health care, is a very important thing to learn in your professional endeavors. The students that we have today to present, I'm going to have Dr. Jane Shelby, sorry Jane, introduce in just a moment. I would like to point out that they are missing one of the best WWAMI lecturers that we have in Kate Mulligan, who is teaching on their campus this morning. And they also have to be back to class this afternoon. But this project is too special, and the youthful enthusiasm that we get from our students is kind of a nice counterpoint to this very serious discussion we've had. So I appreciate the fact we put it in here and maybe remind ourselves why we struggle with all of this. And so at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Shelby.
Certainly. Dr. Shelby, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Chair Christian and Commissioner Stern, Regents, and esteemed members of the Montana University system. It is my pleasure to present to you two of our first-year WWAMI students from MSU Bozeman, Brian Wilson and Samantha Dooley, and they're going to present to you their experiences in Browning, Montana.
Again, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you. We are delighted to do so. Our project that we did in Browning started last fall, where we collected various donated items in Bozeman, mostly children's books and warm clothing, to bring up to Browning. When we arrived in Browning for the weekend, we spent part of our morning in the school system doing presentations for all ages on health education. We then served a community lunch and interacted with the residents of Browning, and our trip ended with a discussion about what the health system is like for the Blackfeet, and specifically a tour of the Indian Health Service Hospital.
There we go. But our trip was really more than just about providing a service project and talking to kids about the importance of education. The project was designed by Dr. Jane Shelby. She's the Executive Director of Health Sciences at Montana State University in Bozeman. We had two goals, basically. First, we wanted to establish a partnership between our program and their community, hopefully for years to come, and hopefully to use this project as a template to interact with other Native American communities in Montana. The second goal that we had was really just as an educational experience for us as first-year WWAMI students. And I think that most of us came to Browning with a limited understanding of the community, its culture, and the healthcare delivery system there.
We hope to explain to you how we accomplished these goals using quotes from ourselves and other members of our class about the impact that our service learning had on us and what we specifically learned. So at each transition, I'll pause briefly so you can read the quote, and then we'll elaborate on those details.
Yeah, so the pictures here are of us loading up the donations that we collected, books and winter clothes, like Sam said, and I think the quote really says it all up here. It was pretty amazing that we got a U-Haul trailer full of donations in a 2-week period. I think that reflects a lot about the characteristics of the Bozeman community and our own ability to bring awareness to the issues in Browning.
Another component of the donations we collected were over 800 books from the CDC that are in what's called the Eagle Book Series, which is a series of 4 children's books written by a Native American physician that address health issues in a culturally sensitive way. And we were able to distribute those books to each of the elementary students and give them a choice of one of them to take home and to share with their family, which they were very enthusiastic about. On the lower part of the slide is a list of the 5 schools that we visited. There were over 1,000 students that heard our presentations and only 16 of us. So it was quite the undertaking, but we all had a lot of fun. We didn't know exactly what to expect from the school system in Browning, but I would say that all of us were very delightfully surprised by the reception we received and the quality of the teachers, the facilities, and their attitude toward the education of the Browning students. Like Brian said, we went to Browning to share and to serve. but I can't emphasize enough that we also learned so much. And the goal of this project really was to create sort of a spirit of reciprocity where we're both giving and receiving, sharing and learning. I was in one of the presentation groups that spoke with the elementary students, and it was very fun. I was worried about the impact that we could have at such a young age of students, but they ended up being very receptive and engaging with what we had to say. Part of our presentation was asking them what they wanted to be when they grew up. So we would say, do any of you want to be a nurse? And lots of hands would go up. Do any of you want to be a doctor? And some of the same hands would go up, and you could just see the excitement and the energy they had and the desire to serve their own community, and also how that was applicable to the health of their community.
We also gave presentations at the middle school and the high school. I was in the group that talked to the middle schoolers, and I was pleasantly surprised with how respectful the kids were and how interested they were in our presentation. We gave a total of 5 presentations in the morning and a little bit in the afternoon. They started as just the science class at the beginning, but by the end we had multiple teachers just packing all of their classrooms into ours, so it was pretty cool that way. But I think one of the main things that really stood out in my mind is when a girl in the class asked me, do you think I really could go to college? And I think that's why we were there, is to get those questions out and to show them that it's possible.
This photo is of us distributing some of the warm things that we collected and were able to bring to Browning. And it was the perfect day to do so because it was extremely cold and they were anxious to receive the warm coats and gloves that we had brought. And I think it really resonated with me how much need there was in Browning for this, but also how much need there is in any community in our state. And I think that that's one of the important things we can take away from this experience, is understanding the needs of our community and wanting to meet those, because things like being warm and eating healthy have a really large impact on the health of our future patients, and that's something that we want to keep in mind.
I apologize, I spelled her name wrong. This is Dr. DeRozier, and it's D-E-S, not just D-E. But the top left photo is us preparing lunch. She's the closest person to you in the upper picture. She was absolutely instrumental in making this project a reality. She also happens to be an excellent human being. And she's the first female Blackfeet physician. And she's a perfect example for us in WWAMI what it takes to be a passionate community leader in spite of the negative things that she deals with every day in her community and also in the hospital.
This is a photo of us eating and conversing with some of the residents of Browning. I think for most of the students, this was one of our favorite parts, and it was really important to all of us to be able to interact with the residents and hear their perspective. Being in medical school, we see a lot of people that are similar to ourselves. We spend most of our time talking to our classmates or our professors or physicians in the community that have a lot in common with us. And going to Browning, we were able to interact with people who had experiences that were completely different from what we're used to. And it was a very helpful reminder about what our future is going to be like and how there's other parts of medicine that are pretty important.
Alrighty, here in the top left, we're serving our community lunch out of the back of an SUV. Wasn't entirely as we had planned, but that's how it worked out. I think it was great to be able to just have a casual conversation and figure out what was going on in these people's lives and what their struggles were, just in a really casual sense. And I think that if I wasn't part of the WWAMI program, I may have never had a chance to do something like this. This is a long one, so we'll give you a few extra seconds.
I think this quote is maybe my favorite, and I think it really reflects how all of us were feeling about this and potentially future service learning trips. It's easy for us to be very overwhelmed with the amount of science that we learn, and it's easy to focus on that in our medical studies. But this project helped us remember that there's a really important aspect of humanity and interpersonal relationships that have a huge impact on healthcare delivery. And so I think we walked away having a better understanding of what it means to practice medicine in a holistic way. After the lunch, we were able to interact a little bit more with what the healthcare system is on the Blackfeet. And part of that included a discussion with Dr. Neil Sunroads, who is a new physician to that area. And hearing his advice for us was really important. He's a recent graduate, so he still relates to a lot of what we're going to, and he had some really important insight to share, specifically on how to personalize medicine to individuals, because medicine is going to look differently depending on who your patients are, and he had a lot of really important remarks about what it means to cater medicine to a specific group.
Kind of building on that note, Dr. Sunroads is a great role model for us in the WWAMI program as to what it takes to be a young family physician in an underserved community. He shared with us a ton of insight on the realities of working in Browning and what it takes to really be a part of that community and not solely just practice medicine there.
This quote was from one of the students in our class who has spent a significant amount of time in Browning prior to being in the WWAMI medical program, including this summer previously. So she was really familiar with the needs of the community. And I think often communities like Browning and other rural areas have a lot of physician turnover or specialists that come into the community for a short period of time and then leave. And we really understood by going to Browning the type of negative impact that has on the community when you're not able to build relationships and understand the people that you're trying to serve. This is another picture of us touring the Indian Health Service Hospital. And we took a class last semester on rural healthcare delivery in Montana and what that's like. But being able to experience it firsthand and meet with real people who are affected by that healthcare delivery added so much value and depth to that course that we all had a better understanding of what it means to practice medicine in a rural area of Montana.
Alrighty, so that's a really short run through of what we did for you. But we just really like to thank you for your time in allowing us to give this presentation about our project and our program. I know all of you in some way are involved in the purpose of our program, and we truly believe this project accomplishes an objective of the WWAMI program. I believe the responses that we got from our classmates that we shared with you on these slides shows that we gained a greater understanding of what it means to practice medicine in Montana, as well as the challenges and riches of Montana's communities. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions.
Thank you for sharing the presentation with us. It's very Regent McLean.
I just have a comment. First of all, I'd just like to say that one of my former scholars, Adam O'Brien, was in Browning last summer doing the same type of work. And second, I'd like to commend and thank the faculty and staff at Montana State for their extraordinary efforts in your superb preparation. And I want to thank each of you for being remarkable ambassadors of the Montana University system as well as the WWAMI program. I wish you continued success. Best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Regent Robinson.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Wilson and Ms. Dooley, I wanted to also thank you for taking that leap of faith and working within this program, because I think it really does, I can sum it up in one word, and I heard it many times in your presentation, is relationships. Is that it's so important to have those relationships, but you need to be willing to dedicate time and effort in order to do that. It isn't done. It's great that we have all of the technology available to us, but it doesn't replace being there one-on-one, working with one another. And I hope within the program that as it moves forward and there's more participants, that that there is a bicultural learning opportunity, that there might be opportunity for some of those K through 12 students to come and see what it's like on one of our campuses and start to learn from you as well. But it's great that you went with such an open mind and heart, and I think that's really important in any country, and it shows the wealth that we have here in Montana. So thank you for your presentation today.
Yeah, and like you're saying, you know, this wasn't just a one and done deal. We're even planning to hopefully go back in April. We have a day planned, so it's designed to be a continued partnership between the WWAMI program and the community up there, and potentially expand to other communities in Montana. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that experience with us and for participating in WWAMI. Dr. Shelby, thank you. Commissioner Stearns, is there an other, or
Unless I don't have any other.
President Cruzado?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I would like to take this as an opportunity to let the board know that in terms of service learning, the state of Montana is one of a handful of states that belong to a national organization called the Campus Compact. And last year, I was privileged to represent the state and letting them know about some of the most important projects that are fostering not only learning, but student retention. What you have seen in terms of WWAMI is absolutely outstanding. The other component, as Regent Robinson just mentioned, is to take a look at what happens when we take our Native American students and allow them an opportunity to go back in the summers and serve their communities. This is already happening in our co-op program in nursing and also in our engineering programs, where it is demonstrated that student retention and success goes up dramatically. So we end up with graduates that go back, serve their communities, and will be instrumental in fostering better understanding. If I may, I would like also to add, you have received our campus reports. As you can see, every campus is doing wonderful things. We had an opportunity to talk about the groundbreaking ceremony for our simulated hospital in Great Falls. That's going to be absolutely essential in giving our students the best quality of education for healthcare professions. We also talked about Northern and their great We Love Northern Ball, where more than $20,000 were raised for student scholarships, and we're very thankful to Commissioner Stearns for attending the event and even dancing a little bit. I heard some things about twist. Every campus at Montana State University is growing by leaps and bounds. Just for you to know, because it ties to what we were talking before, just in Bozeman alone, this spring we have 800 students more when compared to last spring. And I know that there have been talks about economies of scale that are produced when more students come, and some comparisons are established with, well, it's tantamount to what happens in airlines when we have more passengers flying. I don't need to remind this board that the business of higher education is totally different from anything else. Our quote unquote customers, and I know that our faculty, as I do, strongly oppose referring to our students as customers, but our quote-unquote customers are not like people that go to a department store and spend 1 hour with us, or an airline passenger that spends 6 hours with us. We are not even like hospitals, where thankfully those customers get to spend much less time. Our customers stay with us for at least 45 hours every semester. If that's only if they enroll in 1 3-credit course. And they not only make use of the faculty that it's in front of the classroom, they need and deserve a host of other array of services, advising, counseling, the registrar. So it's amazing what the way in which our staff, our faculty are embracing with open arms this great number of students that are coming to Montana University System. I wanted to also, since we submit this report so early on, we don't have time to bring to your attention some events, and I would like to call to your attention some important things. Montana State University received a gift of $3 million from Jake Jabs, an alum from the College of Agriculture who went on and now is a very successful business person, and he has named the Jake Jabs Center for Entrepreneurship in the New West. We are very grateful to him. Last November, this board approved our proposal to compete for the headquarters of the National Solar Observatory. I'm delighted to inform that we will have a site visit in our campus in Bozeman next week, taking a look at what we have to offer. And of course, since last time we met, we celebrated the groundbreaking ceremony for our end zone. Madam Commissioner and the Regents, I think that you received your jerseys, and Regent Robinson will have to earn his stripes before he receives his, I guess. And let me call to your attention something that happened at MSU Billings. And I think that this campus deserves kudos. Last Saturday, I had an opportunity to attend an extraordinary event that it's known as Chicks in Science. And in my mind, it's the perfect illustration of the land-grant mission, how we teach and research and do outreach with excellence. I spent a whole day in MSU Billings on Saturday, and there were hundreds of girls, middle school girls, with their moms, with their fathers, with their uncles, with their neighbors, taking a look at science. There were between 40 and 50 booths with everything from biological sciences, physical sciences, demonstrations, opportunities for hands-on experimentation. And then, to balance it all, there was a long table with a big sign underneath that said, "Free manicures." And in my mind, I thought that was absolutely brilliant, because it conveys to our young girls that the science and being a lady are not in opposition. So I want to commend MSU Billings for such an extraordinary event. I'm delighted to hear that now we're coming up with something for our boys as well, which is absolutely essential. So kudos to MSU Billings for taking their land grant mission to a new height. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I did not know that President Cruzado would take this opportunity to open a door that for Chancellor Groseth and I to walk through. So Chancellor, come back up because and explain this picture from A Chick in Science.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Stearns. Regent Barrett.
Well, since we're on the topic, I'd have to share one anecdote about what occurred at the groundbreaking for the end zone. It was a nice event. It was, imagine the middle of winter in Bozeman, and we had a bright, sunshiny day where you actually could just wear a sweater, it's unheard of. And some of you saw some of the press coverage, but as part of that groundbreaking, they had a very large excavator there, which was, the tracks were taller than President Cruzado. So she put a hard hat on, went over, they hoisted her up into the excavator, and she very expertly spun it around, took a big scoop, dumped it, and I thought, well, that was nice, symbolic. And then she turned around and took another great big scoop, and I'm standing there, and someone behind me said, I don't think she's going to stop until she builds the damn thing.
Thank you, Regent Barrett. Members of the board, just something Commissioner Stearns and I have kicked around. If you recall, back a few years, we used to sort of go through all the campus reports and all the student reports, and we've moved away from that a little bit in the essence of time, but as today, we're President Cruzado, and we'll do later with the students, we want to sort of come back to maybe tackling one campus at a time, if that works for everybody, just so we can get a little flavor of what's happening on the ground and on the street, which is why we're here, and sometimes we lose sight of that. So we'll be doing that both for the campus reports and the student reports on a trial run. Commissioner Stearns?
And with that, President Engstrom, unless you have immediate announcements, then you're on notice for the May meeting. Thank you.
All right, then we will take a break and reconvene at 10:15 with the Budget and Oversight Committee.
Thank you, Chairman Christian. And Mick will be up here, I'm sure. Don't have that heavy of an action item scheduled in front of us today. Do have quite a bit of information items. And of course, any questions, comments will be welcomed at any time related to any of the items. That said, Commissioner Stearns, I see you running around. Are you looking for Mick to help kick this off? If that's okay. Is Mick in charge of this first item? Or can we call on Frank to help us get it going? Action item, authorization to accept donation of property at Montana Tech.
Frank's they were visiting on a different deal. Maybe we can just go to the information item and then we'll come back to it.
Sounds perfect. Thank you very much. Great. First information item today is an update on the energy performance contract out of MSU Bozeman. I would yield to President Cruzado or anybody of your team to take the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regent Buchanan, this is a follow-up to our information item that was first introduced in our January meeting, and the board members had some questions, and therefore we have charged Vice President Craig Roloff to proceed with a report. So thank you, Craig.
Thank you, President Cruzado. And Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to introduce this. We have some other folks here today to help with this presentation. But as President Cruzado said, really our objective is to address the questions and concerns that you expressed during our January discussion so that we can clear up any lingering concerns about this project before we seek your authority to move forward with anything. So joining me today are Wade Curriton from the State DEQ, John Canfield from Trident Engineering Services, Energy Services, and Tim Toman from McKinstry Company. What we intend to do is just quickly walk you through the information item and hopefully leave sufficient time to answer any additional questions that you might have.
Mr. Chair and Board, good morning.
My name is Wade Cureton. I'm a mechanical engineer with the Department of Environmental Quality. And I'd like to just address our involvement in this project effort. And in the process, you'll hear quite a bit about what this team has done exactly correctly. Montana law in 9011 or 0411 MCA states that energy performance contracts are a viable means by which state agencies can obtain energy conservation, water conservation without an initial capital outlay. DEQ is empowered to pre-qualify these energy service companies, and Montana University System is empowered to enter into energy performance contracts. So what we did at DEQ is we formally and properly issued a request for qualification to interested energy service companies, and we evaluated their responses based on the criteria, the capabilities that they provided us with against the very specific requirements of the law. Montana State University at that time merely needed to go out and select an ESCO and directly negotiate an investment grade audit contract with them. But they took a little more conservative approach. They instead invited the top 3 ESCOs to present to them personally their qualifications. Now, these meetings were documented. They were very fairly conducted, and I attended all of them. So I can tell you that we were on the right track as MSU followed the very specific written requirements that DEQ provided to select these energy service companies through a secondary selection process. So what I'm saying is that there's a very auditable trail been established as to how McKinstry was chosen as our ESCO. Now, to further assist Montana State University in obtaining an energy performance contract that is based on an investment grade audit, which is a requirement of the law, DEQ has provided the services of Trident Energy, and in the person of John Canfield. He'll be up here just in a second. And what John does is he provides technical consulting and project oversight. We selected John and his company, Trident Energy, through the rigor of a RFQ process again. We compared his qualifications, the qualifications of other companies like his, to very specific written requirements. So again, there's an auditable trail there. What you have is the best in the business available at your service to assist you in negotiating and entering into this very important long-term energy performance contract. So, Mr. Chairman, Board, thank you for your time. I'll be standing by if you have questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Roloff?
Mr. Chairman, so McKinstry has completed its audit of over 2 million square feet of the auxiliary facilities on our campus. And they've identified over 300 potential energy conservation projects. The beauty of the statute, the Energy Performance Contract Statute, is that it allows you to blend a mix of technical and energy and deferred maintenance projects that are scattered in a variety of buildings into one contract. But the business model is pretty simple. Essentially, MSU will compensate McKinstry for their engineering work, their management of the construction projects, and then their measurement and verification of the energy savings. And in this process, we feel like we still maintain very good control over the construction work because MSU will review all of the contractor and subcontractor bids for all of the modifications that we decide to commit to. And so we're still assured that we'll have the final say in selecting the very best contractor for each project at the very best price. So where we're at is that MSU, obviously, we're not likely to get through 300 projects, and some are not as beneficial as many others. But we have identified about 20 to 22 modifications that are in 4 different buildings, and that's in Exhibit 2 of this document, that we hope to initiate work on yet this spring, and as a phase 1 effort, and it's about a $2 million commitment. And then we expect this to be successful, and so what we want to do is follow that success with other phased projects over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. And with that, Mr. Canfield will talk to us a little bit about the actual contract.
Thank you, and good morning to all of you. My name is John Canfield. My company is Trident Energy Services. I'm the president and founder based out of Longmont, Colorado. And as Wade Curitin already informed you, I am currently under contract with the DEQ to provide these services for state agencies in higher ed in helping to support energy performance contracting in those agencies. So today, what I would like to do is briefly, you've probably had a primer on performance contracting in the past. I'm going to repeat some things here, again, and emphasize what I feel are some of the best benefits of this delivery process called energy performance contracting. And I do want to say that performance contracting region-wide in the Northwest, the West, and nationally has, I would guess, transitioned from being an alternative delivery method to one of the primary delivery methods to improve the buildings in higher ed nationally. So performance contracting, in a nutshell, is a process where capital improvements, energy improvements, can be funded by the resulting savings from the implementation of the measures themselves. What that means is that as you replace older stuff in the buildings, they generate cost savings, whether they're energy cost savings or maintenance cost savings, they're real savings. Through the EPC process, the energy performance contracting process, you capitalize on those savings and use those funds to pay for the measures over some period of time. And so the guaranteed savings stream to help pay back for the projects is generated from the actual reduction in existing utility and operations budgets. And again, through a formal process, these funds that are currently in a utility budget are redirected, because you're not now sending them to the utility company because you're not using the energy. So rather than send those funds to the utility companies, you are now redirecting those funds to, in this case, I understand there will be a loan from the Board of Investments. And I know MSU is looking at a time frame not to exceed 15 years based on what they see today from the package of measures developed by McKinstry. So again, to re-emphasize that the source of funding is money that is going to be saved from a number of budgets, your utility budget and your maintenance and operations budget. There are some benefits that I really would like to highlight. Some are immediate and some are long-term. Some of the immediate benefits are, one, you have immediate improvement of your buildings. In the case of this first phase for MSU, they are improvements to the auxiliary buildings on their campus, which can only enhance and improve the learning and student and staff and faculty environment on the campus. That is an immediate improvement. There's also the immediate reduction in the energy use on the campus. Not only the use, but the costs associated with the energy use as well. Electricity, fuel, natural gas, and any other energy using systems on the campus. And associated with the energy reduction is an associated reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the energy that is being saved and reduced on the campus as well. Those are immediate benefits. Some of the longer-term benefits, I feel, and I think we collectively feel, that once you improve the environment within these buildings, that's going to be sustained over a long period of time, and that the students, staff, faculty will continue to benefit from the improvements in the buildings over a period of time. It's also going to reduce the maintenance costs in these facilities. I mean, today there's an O&M budget because equipment is old and it needs to be replaced. By removing it, replacing it with new stuff, the maintenance on that equipment will reduce as well. And so there's going to be long-term maintenance cost savings over the life of this project as well. I think, though, one of the main benefits from a pure financial perspective is that by reducing the energy use in the facilities today, reducing the cost associated with that energy use today is a hedge against the inevitable future utility rate increases. We know historically, and I think we can expect during the rest of our lifetimes and our children's lifetimes, that we are going to see continuous rate increases from all of our utility companies. By reducing the energy in your facilities today, you will develop an incredible cost avoidance package, because this is energy that you're not going to have to pay for in the future, and particularly the financial impact is when the rates start to increase. So investing today on a comprehensive process to have an overall effect on reducing utility use and cost is going to provide a very strong hedge against the inevitable rate increases that we're going to see in the future. I've been asked to talk specifically about a couple of contract processes, and I'm going to focus on two of the guarantee factors associated in the contracts. One is, and this I would ask you to reference Exhibit 4 in your packet. This refers to what is called the Guaranteed Maximum Price Guarantee. At the end of the phase that McKinstry is completing now, which is called the Technical Energy Audit phase, they will, with MSU's input, develop a final scope of work. I think Craig had mentioned roughly 22 to 25 measures are on the table right now. Associated with that final mutually developed scope will be a not-to-exceed price for McKinstry to implement those measures, all right? So once that's developed, that price is in, MSU will apparently approach the Board of Investments and say, okay, we need $2.2 million, whatever that dollar value was, okay? So at that time, with a notice to proceed, McKinstry will then competitively bid for contractors for all of the measures that have been approved for that final scope. The beauty of this process is that not only are contractors highly competitive, but also McKinstry is going to solicit locally based contractors as well as Montana-based contractors, and with the input of the university will mutually select the best qualified contractors, some of which probably will be your local contractors as well. During that bid process, one of the advantages of the performance contracting process is that it's a complete open book process, which means as McKinstry will be bidding these to contractors, the university will have availability to review all of the bid docs, all of the prices, and again, actively participate in selecting the most appropriate contractors to perform the work, as well as the most appropriate specifications of the equipment to be installed in the college as well. So that's the one guarantee. To me, the most important one is the actual guarantee of the energy cost savings. Through energy performance contracting, the performance takes on two roles. One is the performance of the equipment installed, and one is the financial performance of the project itself. And so the savings that McKinstry will guarantee are going to be used to capitalize the loan from the Board of Investments. If any year subsequent to the installation of those measures that those savings are not met, the guarantee says that McKinstry must literally cut a check for whatever the dollar shortfall is on an annual basis, such that the university can make whole to their payments back to the Board of Investments that they've already agreed to do. And so to prove the savings, the question always comes up, well, how do we know the savings are actually being met? Well, there's a formalized process through the investment grade energy audit and into the energy performance contract called measurement and verification. It is a formal process within the industry that uses international standardized protocols to show that the savings are actually being met on a year-by-year basis. One of the roles that I will continue to play as a contractor and consultant to the DEQ is to do technical due diligence on the reporting that will be provided by McKinstry through this period. The state legislation requires that the formal measurement and verification process take place for a minimum of 3 years after implementation. At that time, if the university is satisfied that the savings will be sustained after that period, they can then voluntarily terminate that measurement and verification agreement with McKinstry. However, if there is a level of discomfort, they then can have the option to continue that through the term of the financing period as well. So those are the two basic guarantees that are inherent in the energy performance contracting process. I've given you a lot of information in a short period of time. Normally this is about a 2-hour discussion, and I hope you've absorbed some of it, and hopefully it was a review for some of you, but I wanted to really emphasize some of what we feel collectively are some of the strong points and advantages of going forward with this process. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members. My name is Tim Tolman. I'm with McKinstry. I'm the business manager for Montana. I'm going to discuss two things with you relatively quickly. I'm going to discuss our track record with similar universities and performance contracting, and then I'm going to discuss our financial information that you've requested for us as a company. Right now in Pacific Northwest, we are working with, and this is Exhibit 7 for you folks. We're working with about 8 universities. We have a little over $130 million in performance contracts, either going on or in the initial stage of happening with those universities. I will tell you right now, at this point in time, we have not written a shortfall check. We're not in the business to write shortfall checks. I get in a lot of trouble for things like that. And so we have none of that happening at the moment. These measures include lighting, controls, HVAC, refrigeration, windows, insulation, biomass, all sorts of different measures that can save energy and therefore save dollars for the universities. In addition, in Exhibit 7, you'll also see that we have another 17 universities that we work with nationwide in higher education projects, some of them not being performance contracts. The second thing that you've asked for is in Exhibit 8, and that is what's your financial strength, McKinstry? How do we know you'll be there? Can you, if we have a shortfall, can you write the check? So what we've done is we've supplied you with a letter. We're a privately held company. We don't usually stand in front of people and tell everybody what our financials are. But what we have offered to you is to have you select a couple board members, whatever you want to do, sign a non-disclosure. We'd be glad to provide the financials to those board members so you can look at them. But I will tell you that we're 50 years old with 50 years of profitability. We've been a performance contracting firm for about 11 years. We've been doing energy work for 20 plus years. We have about a $20 million line of credit that we use. We never use more than 25% of that. We're a very conservative company. We're a construction company, in essence, a construction engineering energy company. And overall, we have, you ask about bonding, we can bond about $300 million. And specifically for a single project, we can bond $100 million. The projects that we're talking about at Montana State University, this project is $2 million. We have a lot of universities where right now we're doing projects of $30 and $40 million. This is an excellent way for universities to achieve energy savings up front and not have to spread it out over the 6, 7, 10 years of doing business as usual. So with that, I'll entertain questions for any of us. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Questions, Regent Barrett?
You thought you were going to get off easy.
You didn't get me very far, did you?
No. Let me preface this by my comments. As I'm going to ask a little bit about the finances, but I'm going to say up front, my questions and concern about this would not be enough that would keep me from voting to approve the project. But I have some questions, and frankly relate less to here, but to the biomass project, which we're also dealing with, and you're also dealing with, because they are distinct, but they are related events. And if I recall, McKinstry at one time used to be headquartered on Bainbridge Island, Washington.
No, our first headquarters was in Bellevue, and then we have headquarters, they're now in Seattle.
Okay.
And we've been in Montana for about 3 years.
No, I'm trying to remember, because a long time ago in a galaxy far away, I lived in Seattle and worked for Honeywell and worked with McKinstry.
Okay.
And they're a fine company then, and they're a fine company now, so I don't have any problem. But all I want to suggest is to the board members that we should consider the project based on the merits of the individual components, and the guarantee component is nice, but that's not the reason to do the projects. I mean, clearly you look at your thing, you do $450 million worth of business a year, you're counting, if there are shortfall checks to be written, you're counting on a level of diversity, because if they all did, it wouldn't work. And so we see that. So I don't have any question about the strength as it is, but we have to keep it in perspective, and that should not be the reason for it. It's nice, and we're not turning it down, but that should not be the reason for making the decision. It should be the business analysis that is the reason for making the decision.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is a project, this is a construction project, and energy engineers and guaranteed savings are a benefit that you get. They mitigate the risk of the university, they mitigate the risk of the state, but it's not the reason overall to do it. You're correct, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You bet.
Thank you, Regent Barrett. Deputy Commissioner Robinson.
Mr. Chair, just a couple of comments. Worked somewhat on this particular project or proposal, and I think I just want to point out a couple of the advantages as I see, and it differentiates a little bit from the biomass project. This particular, although we call it an energy performance contract, I think as indicated in 2B of the items, one of the real advantages of this is the ability to group together a number of smaller projects under one sort of umbrella. And it makes the process that we have to utilize here in state government in terms of requests for proposals, et cetera, much more streamlined. And this particular phase one proposal would bring forth a group of projects that might total around $2 million. And you can see from the list of those projects presented, I think there'll be obvious energy savings when you talk about light fixtures and thermostats and those types of things, which we've done already in a number of situations and have saved energy dollars. So I think that's one of the real advantages of this particular proposal. Secondly, I think it's important to understand that this is phase one of perhaps a multi-phase. We may be seeing additional projects moving forward over the next 3-4 years. So I think that's important to keep in mind. But the ability to move a number of small projects under one umbrella, I think certainly makes our process much more efficient in terms of renovation, construction, and also the blending of those energy projects, energy savings within those projects.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Robinson. Other questions or comments from board members? Regent Hamilton.
I'm just kind of curious as to what the board's level of involvement will be as some of these projects come forward and what that process might look like.
That is a good question. Perhaps, Mick, you've got...
Mr. Chairman and Regent Hamilton, we would approach this just like any other project that we bring to the board for approval. We believe that the next step is actually to submit a request for authority to proceed, and like any other project proposal that we submit, we would provide an outline of the project elements and the project costs and the source of funding and the business plan for covering the debt service, and any other related item. In this case, it doesn't affect the facility use or anything like that, but we'd go through the same process in the same form as we do with any project.
Regent Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up question. Can you give us an idea of what the investment to date has been in this project on the part of MSU, how much money you've spent, and then if you were to break out the consulting and report writing services from the actual project construction costs as you move forward, what that might be as far as cost to the institution?
Mr. Chairman and Regent Hamilton, the audit was just an engineering contract. Essentially, we contracted with McKinstry to come in and do a detailed audit, and obviously we sought Regents' approval to do this back in May, and so as you can see, it's been practically a year of work by an engineering firm. And that was about a $500,000 project. And so they went through in very great detail, 2 million square feet, a very diverse set of facilities, all the way from student health to, the male dormitory. So that in the future, the price that we would see is the project contract. And so, in other words, the engineering and the construction management and the construction and the verification, that would be a package price that we're talking about, that we're viewing to be in this 2.2 million range.
Regent McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Canfield, he mentioned the fact that he would be looking to the community and then to the state to find the subcontractors, if you will. Would that be something, and following up on Regent Hamilton's question, would those subcontractors then be something that would come back to this board for approval? And I guess the reason for my question is would we have the ultimate decision authority regarding any contracts that might be offered to folks out of state?
I think I'm going to defer my answer to Mr. Roloff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Regent McLean, the final selection of contractors or subcontractors is not something that's brought back to the board. Once we have the authority, it then becomes the responsibility of the contractor and in this case it would be contractor and the owner and the consultant to make those decisions. And frankly, it would be the primary basis would be the delivery of the product or of the project requested at the very best price. So it would be very similar to if you had a regular state contract bid, where again the area.
Thank you, and I guess I would just like to follow up on my question. I think that it's imperative that whenever possible, we contractors to spend state dollars, and I just wanted to make it clear that that's my sentiment as we move forward on this or any other project. So thank you.
I'd like to add something, if I may, to that. We are in the midst of doing somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 million of this work in the state of Montana, either municipalities, school districts, universities, cities, counties, the whole 10 yards. I've been here for 51 of my 58 years. I'm not going to, as the head of McKinstry and Estate, I'm not going to give a job to an out-of-state person when my neighbor's out of work. It's just not going to happen. We have some large projects going on. The only time that somebody will come in from out of state is if there is not the ability of a contractor to do this in-state. You have to understand that we have the risk of making sure this is done correctly. So the lighting, the HVAC, and it's something you probably don't think about, but a huge savings at MSU is the water. The water savings, new fixtures. You go into a dorm at MSU right now and turn on the faucet, it'll take your skin off. You know, and so it's you can really do a lot of things for water conservation, things like that. Back to it, we can do this with local contractors, and we will. You're welcome.
Regent Robinson.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I wanted to say I think the structure of this, I think, works well. I think I like the idea of having that umbrella company to go to that really has expertise in that area and provide that owner's representation. So I think with that in mind, I think it's something well worth considering in the potential cost savings and energy savings. One of the questions I had was in relationship to the priority projects that were mentioned. Do we have a value of those projects right now that would be kind of the first phase of this? Is that what we're hearing with the $2 million, or is it the actual fee that we're talking about in this case, or the estimated fee?
Mr. Rolfe, good question.
Mr. Chairman, Regent Robinson, Exhibit 2 lists the projects that we've targeted. We don't have the final audit investment grade numbers for these. We have the first estimates, and so that's where we got the 2.2 number from. But before we move forward, obviously, in the contract we'll have the exact numbers for each one of these projects. The way that we selected these was based on their benefit, their payback. In some cases, though, it's also lighting, for example. We have literally hundreds of residence hall rooms that have an old style fixture in them that we have to replace. We're going to get to the point where we can't buy tubes to put in the fixtures, and so it's a good energy conservation investment, but it's also a critical deferred maintenance investment where we have to start switching out the systems that we have. And so essentially that's how these were selected. It's a mix of what we believe are the most urgent and some of the most beneficial projects.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, the follow-up question to that then is in regards, if that's the value of those projects, is have we come to an estimate of what the cost would be for the services to oversee those is what we're basically talking about here. Do we have an idea of what it would be a percentage of those projects, wouldn't it?
Mr. Chairman, maybe I could have Tim answer that, but we're looking at one package price. He could talk about the percentage of that package price and how that would relate to the engineering and the oversight and the measurement.
To answer directly, the $2 million or whatever that amount tends to be includes all the oversight, includes all the construction management. That includes everything. When we sit down with the university at the end and we say it's $2.1 million, at that point in time we will sit there and break that out by line item so they can see the fees, the subcontractor costs, they will see everything, and at that point in time we'll come up with exactly what the construction management fees and all those other items are for McKinstry and the subcontractors. But the $2 million includes everything.
Great, thank you.
Okay, you bet, thank you.
So in summary, we should anticipate a proposal for approval this May, is that correct, Mr. Roloff? As an action item?
Mr. Chairman, yes, we're most anxious to move forward, and so if there are no other concerns, then we will be pursuing that. But obviously, the objective of today was to just make sure that we addressed any concerns that might exist.
Any other concerns or questions from members of the board? Staff or faculty? Great, thank you. Wraps up information item 1. Moves us to item B, President Engstrom, an update on the biomass proposal at U of M Missoula.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'll make a few brief comments on this topic, and then I'll ask Vice President Duringer to fill in some detail. I would like to take just a minute to remind us why we are doing this project. I believe this is an exercise in responsibility and leadership on the part of the University of Montana. Several years ago, my predecessor, George Dennison, was among the charter members who signed on to the President's commitment on climate change. It was a commitment on the part of university presidents around the country to work toward carbon neutrality in recognition of the importance of the climate change issue. I'm happy to say that since then, Montana State has also signed on to that climate change commitment. So there are 4 principal reasons why we should be doing this project. The first of these is cost savings. Our fuel costs will move from the range of about $9 per decatherm to something in the range of $7 per decatherm. We've been talking to the legislature all spring now about our stewardship of resources. And so to make an improvement in the cost of energy that amounts to 15, 20%, something in that range, is something that we obviously have to take seriously and try to accomplish. Secondly, in terms of the carbon footprint of the University of Montana, this is the single most important item that we can do to improve our carbon footprint. Changing the source of our energy will improve our carbon footprint by 20 to 30%. There isn't another single action that we can take to get that kind of improvement. Now, why is that? I'm going to revert to my chemistry professor mode here for just a moment, if I could. Oh, God. I wish I had a blackboard. Yes. The reason this is important for our carbon footprint is because we will be using a recyclable form of carbon. When you burn carbon from any source, it converts to carbon dioxide, and that is the culprit, the major culprit in global warming. The biomass takes that carbon dioxide back up through photosynthesis and converts it back into woody biomass. That happens on a time scale that is essentially the growth of a tree. years, maybe a few decades, depending on the kind of tree we're talking about. So that carbon is recycled completely within the biosphere, the living part of the world around us. Fossil fuels, to be sure, are also recyclable. Ultimately, that carbon dioxide will be recycled in the form of coal or gas or oil. That takes place on a time frame of millions of years. So when you think of the time frame important to us as individuals or even as civilized societies, burning biomass recycles that carbon dioxide on a time frame important to us and therefore important to the problem of global warming. Fossil fuels recycle that carbon on a time frame that none of us as individuals can relate to or imagine, and even societies. So it is virtually a one-way movement of carbon from in the ground to the atmosphere. So biomass burning is the appropriate way to go in terms of recycling carbon. This particular process that we're talking about is not simply the burning of wood as you would throw it in your fireplace and burn that wood in a very inefficient process where in normal combustion processes, the efficiency of those is very, very low. Consequently, you get very low energy output and you get a lot of residue left over in the form of particulates and pollutants and so on. This biomass process is really a gasification process where the biomass is first converted to a gas that is burned. The high temperature of that gasification process makes this a very, very efficient process, both in terms of energy production and in terms of the decrease of pollutants. That's why we can do this process, and as Bob will say, in a way that keeps pollutants essentially no different in the end than they are in the burning of natural gas. Thirdly, by using biomass, particularly woody biomass, to Regent McLean's point a moment ago, we are driving a local industry. We are helping the timber industry. Maybe not directly. This isn't the reason that they would go out and mill or timber those trees in the first place, but it's making use of really the waste product of that industry. And so it is a driver of a local industry, and I feel we have the responsibility to do that. Fourthly, and this may be the most important given who we are, this is an opportunity for education. As we build this gasification plant that we're talking about here, we will build a classroom as an integral part of this plant. Our College of Technology students, our forestry students, our environmental science students will all be integrated into this process. They'll be involved in the startup phase of this process. They'll be involved in the ongoing monitoring of the biomass plant as it goes along in operation. So those are four very fundamental reasons for going forward. I want to make two comments about the process. The first of these is that I want to congratulate and thank Vice President Duringer for the very open process that he designed along with our friends from McKinstry, Nextera, and even the Department of Environmental Quality. He held open forums that were very well attended, 100 or so people per forum, in a way that allowed them to mingle and mix, view posters, and ask their questions in a very non-threatening, informal kind of a setting, and then come back and get the answers to those questions a few weeks later. So it was a very open process. Secondly, you've been hearing about this now for some period of time because we feel it is critical to do our due diligence on this. It is a leadership project. There aren't a lot of universities doing this yet. We want to make sure ourselves that this is the right thing to do. So we've been very careful about due diligence along the way. So with those comments, I'd ask Vice President Duringer if he would just give you a few more update points.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this won't be a chemistry lesson. It's pretty simple. As you know, we held a question session in December. We fielded 85 questions from the general public on that. And I told everybody at that point we would come back to them as soon as we had the answers to the questions and have another open forum. So on the 9th of February, we held an answer session. And we had about 150 people show up, and we presented answers to every one of the questions. Now, some of the people didn't like the answers, but we answered every question. We also used that 9 February session as the initial scoping session for as is required under the Montana Environmental Policy Act. So that process has officially started. And we just had the closing of that period, I guess just a couple days ago, and I think we got 8 or 10 public comments that we'll address in our MEPA process. We're now in the process of securing an air quality permit. That's a very complicated process, but we're working very diligently with both McKinstry and Bison Engineering in Missoula to make sure that we dot the I's and cross the T's on all of that. We anticipate we will have a draft air quality permit in hand by late April or the first part of May. I'm really pressing to get it for the May board meeting, but I don't know if I can physically make that happen. Our MEPA analysis, which is an EA, an economic or environmental analysis, is underway, and we anticipate we will have that out for public comment in May. And then if all is well and we hit all our markers, we should have a construction permit by 1 July. And then finally, with the help of Dan Villa, we have applied for all of the qualified energy conservation bonds that were allocated to the state of Montana, some $10 million. We've sent in our application, official application to the Department of Administration on that. And as you know from previous talks I've given, you save 70% of the interest on those bonds because it's underwritten by the federal government. So the process is moving forward. We think we understand it. And I hope to be able to come to you in May, to ask, to go to Regent Hamilton's question, authority to construct, authority to bond, let's go. Questions?
Thank you, Dr. Derringer. Any questions, comments from the board? Regent Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and President Engstrom, for explaining the carbon process to me in a way that I can actually understand, I think. But I do have a question, and it's maybe a philosophical question, but I think it goes to our responsibility as institutions. And I appreciate the efforts and the work that's gone into building what I think is really a green project and that uses Montana's resources in an excellent way. But in the process that you described, I'm not understanding how you close that loop. If we're going to cut trees and burn trees and do it in an efficient way, at some point we have to plant more trees to take care of the CO2. So who's responsible for that portion of the environmental loop?
Regent Hamilton, members of the board, let me begin the answer to that, but I know we have several forestry experts in the audience who may want to jump in here. My understanding is that when a timber operation takes place, that reseeding needs to happen in a matter of just a few years. That may happen naturally, in which case those trees are beginning to grow, taking that CO2 back out of the air. If it doesn't happen naturally, then the timber organizations, the companies, have the responsibility to go in and do the reseeding. And so, again, we probably would not cut trees down specifically to burn in this particular project. Timber would be sold for other reasons, usual reasons for that industry, and we would largely be using the waste product from that harvesting operation. Neil and Perry, did I get that right on the reseeding?
You did very well. That's exactly right. Our fuel strategy to get the price point we need to get on fuel is not standing marketable timber. It's residue that's left after timber operations.
Mr. Chairman, if I could follow up, because I understand that, and I think that's good, that that's really the plus side of the project in my mind. But I don't know how many trees it takes to clean the CO2 that's the residual product of this. And I guess if we're saying that those timber people that are providing us with the slag fuel are the ones that are responsible for making sure that the appropriate number of trees are planted to take care of our emissions, then I'm okay with it. I just want to understand that somebody out there is also addressing that part of it.
Yeah, I think I can give you a short answer to that, Regent Hamilton. We asked, that was one of the questions that was asked at one of our sessions. So I went to the U.S. Forest Service and asked them to give us an estimate of how much standing timber there is within a 100-mile zone of Missoula. And the answer came back, I think it was 560 million tons. And that's no regrowth of timber at all. This plant will use about 16,000 tons. So the difference, I mean, just on a scale of difference, you're exponentially smaller, and just the regrowth of the natural reforestation of the forest will replenish this wood naturally.
I think a part of this project, though, is to use some byproducts from our own university-owned forest lands, and I would assume we are responsible for that and in control of that. Is that as far as reforesting it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Regent Christian, members of the board. At least one source of fuel for this project would be our own Lubrecht forest. And as you may or may not know, we have a fair amount of beetle kill in the Lubrecht forest right now. And actually, that beetle kill timber is pretty good fuel because it's dried on the, it's dried before you harvest it. And so at least some of the fuel will come from the Lubrecht forest, and we need to do that in a cost-effective way ourselves, obviously, so that won't be the only source of fuel by any means. I see our provost and forester is up there ready to provide more detail. Perry?
Well, if I might just make a comment, Regent Christian, and in answer to Regent Hamilton's question. One of the things that is of great value to us is the fact that young trees fix carbon a lot faster than old trees do. So as you have harvested, removed the material, and you get the new growth coming up, as they're rapidly growing as young trees, they are really processing carbon through the photosynthesis process. So that makes a big difference. If we can get really vigorous growing stands, we can process a lot more than we're taking off initially, and that's going to help us in the long run. And then we need to be in a continuous program, of course, of managing those forests so that we can continue to clean the air, produce wood products, and these residuals that go with it. So I just want to make that additional comment that we get young ones growing, it's really going to be beneficial to us.
Commissioner Stearns?
Yes, this is for Perry Brown. I'm acting like a legislative chairman here. I'm reminded, Mr. Chairman, that maybe a habit that we do have in the legislative sessions, that because this is being filmed, I think it is interesting background for the people of Montana who will be watching this program on Sunday. Would you identify people yourself so that we know your background? That would be great.
Okay, well, yeah, the president had identified me just briefly, but my name is Perry Brown. I am the provost at the University of Montana, but I'm the former dean of the College of Forestry and Conservation at the University of Montana and had been in that position for 16 years and reasonably well versed in some of these topics anyway.
That's the point I thought should be made. And if I may, Chairman Buchanan, I would like to ask a question, and of Mr. Derringer. Some of the questions we've heard lately are just concerns of the neighbors and about the air quality that they worry might be affected in the sort of closed-in valley of the eastern part of the Five Valleys there by the university. I'm sure that has been addressed, or it will be looked at in the MIPA process, or would you at least comment on that for me? Thank you.
Chairman, Commissioner Stearns, we are required by law to respond to all of those comments, and we'll do it either through the environmental analysis or the MIPA process, but every one of them will be addressed.
Other questions or comments? I have a couple just along that line. When this item or this project was first proposed, it was very highlighted on the economic benefit and whatnot. And I'm not positive that I'm an advocate that we're in the analysis business of where energy prices are going. So for me, it's become more of an exciting project on the educational component, as Dr. Engstrom just outlined, but definitely from environmental perspective. And I know that many concerns that we've been addressing in these public comments are related to the environmental impact. And I trust and look forward to seeing a successful process going through the permitting process, not only for air quality, but the other permits that I know are required to give the green light, and trust that we're advancing those at a pace which is going to align itself with the approval in front of the board, or at least the recommendation for approval. So
that's our intent.
Right. Thank you very much. Other comments or questions? Great. Thank you, Dr. Derringer. We're a little bit behind schedule here, so let's move on to item C on the information column, review of biennial fee and approval processes. I assume this is an OCHI-managed conversation?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I have a vivid recollection of a couple of years ago in Great Falls when we had an interesting discussion regarding fees. And so I thought it would be best to have a little bit of a review, especially we have, I think, 3 new regions that have not been through the semi-annual or biannual approach to dealing with approval of tuition and fees. And today's focus will just be on fees. I have issued some guidance to the campuses regarding fee increases with the approval of the members of the Budget Committee of the board. The guidance that we provided is to look at the Consumer Price Index, and I've used a 2% threshold as a Consumer Price Index for fees, with the understanding that, you know, if we do have cost increases with fees, we would expect that maybe those would be at the Consumer Price Index, and we would look on those favorably. With respect to new fees, that would be a different issue, a different discussion. And what I would intend to do in May is to try to segment the submittals that we have from the campuses in terms of those fee increases that fall at 2% or below as a separate category, with the focus of the discussion of the board on the fees that are new fees, whether those be mandatory fees or course fees, or those fee increases that are somewhat above the 2% threshold. Fee increases above that 2% threshold, I have asked for good supportive documentation to indicate the reason for that. You know, we are certainly focused on affordability, and when we talk about fees in terms of the total bill that is received by the student and their parents, the mandatory fees and course fees can certainly be in the range of 25, 30, 35% of the total bill being received. So I think we do have to make sure that we have a focus on that as a real critical element in terms of the affordability. I did attach to the agenda a couple of the main policies that we have in terms of fees. I won't go through those, but we have the policy statement on tuition that was drafted some years ago, and some very good work in terms of discussing a number of the parameters that we would look at. That language mostly focuses on tuition. There is a statement within that policy that says the proliferation of fees should be avoided, and whenever possible, we would like those fees to be blended into the tuition focus. And so I did want to bring that attention to not only the board, but to the campuses in terms of these policy directions. The second policy, tuition and fee approval, again, the every 2-year process in terms of looking at those fees. And it gives a description and, you know, talks a little bit about the definition of the mandatory fees. It also talks about course fees and what are the types of expenditures that we would expect to have covered with course fees. So again, just information for your review. What I would like to do today is just to walk through the sample submittal that you will be receiving and seeing in May from the campuses. And again, when we get to May, we'll be dealing with the fees, and that will be our focus today. But you'll be seeing some summary information. It talks about the various tuition and fee levels being proposed by the campuses. The fee information will be submitted to our office. I think I have a date of early April 1st, and we will do some review. I would also expect that before those fee pieces get to our office, that campus CEOs would also be involved in those discussions to review the propriety of those fee increases. And so we have a multi-step process involved. But we will be presenting a summary sheet that will talk about the tuition increases that we would be looking at, also increases in mandatory fees, and what impact that has on the total cost to the student in the various categories, resident, non-resident, WUI. We will also have information in our fee matrix regarding the distance education fee requirements. So if you're free to move to the next, move on down to see what we have. This particular schedule, I know a little bit hard to see on the screen, but I did want to focus a little bit on mandatory fees. Mandatory fees, the definition of the mandatory fee is that a fee applies to all of the students registered, with very few exceptions, and I can't really read that, but the typical ones that you'll find, the computer fees, the IT fees, the building fees. So those are fees that are, and when I talk about 25 to 30% of the bill for students, it's probably the mandatory fees that account for the bulk of that. So you'll see examples of the mandatory fees for each campus. There will be, on those fee matrices, the increase in the fee and also percentage increase. You'll see a description of those fees and the point in time. You notice a reference to a board item. Mandatory fee increase or mandatory fee would have to be approved by the board before it would go into effect. So there are some descriptions of the previous board items and action that were taken, and a description of what that fee should cover in terms of the expenditure. And then we will get to a significant spreadsheet. If you scroll on down, Frida, significant spreadsheet that talks about all of the other fees. These would, for the most part, be course fees, but you'll have other fees that, parking, those types of fees that might apply in particular situation, but there'll be a significant list of course fees. This particular example is from Western, and they were kind enough to let me use that as an example, and you'll see some of the highlighting that was included on these spreadsheets that talked about, I think highlighted those areas where there was a significant increase in the fee from a dollar perspective or a significant increase in terms of percentage. And so we'll look at that from both viewpoints. I remember Regent Barrett talking about, if you increase the fee from $1 to $2, it's a 100% increase, but it's only $1. And so we will look at that particular situation, and again, look at the justification for, for that increase. $1 is $1 is $1, So we'll, as we review those in our particular office, we will pay attention to those, and there may be appropriate justification for increases of that nature. We certainly are expecting some increases to come forward in terms of course fees because of the van issue, the transportation issue that has been approved previously. So we'll be seeing some of those increases that were communicated to the board prior to this particular meeting regarding the changeover in terms of the transportation mode from 15 passenger vans to smaller vehicles. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would simply open it up for any questions that the board might have or guidance that the board might have as we move forward in terms of the review of fees that we'll see in May.
Any questions or comments from members of the board? I'd have one, and it's carrying back to some comments made this morning. I just would remind all of us of the process of tuition and fees, and I'm hearing some language that suggests that a tuition hike is a foregone conclusion if budgets are not met. That certainly is up for discussion from this person's seat, and same with fees. And to use some language you just used, a cost is a cost is a cost. And so whether we're talking about raising tuition or fees, it's cost from our students' perspective. So this discussion is yet to be had, and I want to make sure that we're all aware that no decisions have been made. Thank you. Regent Hamilton.
Thank you, Chairman Buchanan. Just to follow up on that, you know, I've been watching this process for a few years now, and really if you think about the cost of education, cost of attendance, and from the perspective of a family who, even if they've been to college, it's maybe been 20 years since they've had somebody in college, to look at how to analyze and budget for and plan for cost of education in Montana is not a transparent process. It's far from a transparent process. And I'm going to continue to advocate as we go through this. I think with computers in our technological age, that there are ways to be accountable for how costs are apportioned out, particularly in the area of fees, and yet present a true cost to the consumer of what a college education is going to cost for a family. And it probably, there's two aspects to it. One is the actual cost for attendance, and the other is all of the other sundry costs that are apportioned out for books and room and board and everything else. And I continue to hear from parents this kind of shock. Well, I thought tuition was going to be this, but it's double that when I write the check. And I think we have to figure out a way to be more informative and, again, transparent about how we advertise or market or brand higher education in Montana.
Thank you, and your voice is echoed. Chancellor Groseth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment, and might be instructive to the board. This is nearly a year-long process that we go through. We, on the campuses at Billings, and I don't think it was dissimilar at Northern or at Bozeman in my experience, we send out notification to departments in the university in September. And on the Billings campus, the fee proposals are due in on October 15th and undergo a review through departments and colleges, and we try and complete that at the university level by the end of fall semester, so that early in the spring semester we can move our discussions along to the associated students, make presentations there, and just on our campus, just in the last week, we've received then notification from ASMSUB President Kayla Miller that review has taken place, and those fees have been approved by our student body, and now we're ready to move those along to the Montana State University level and on. So it's a fairly deliberative process, and people get applauded and beaten up along the way.
Thank you, Chancellor Groseth. Any other thoughts or comments as it relates to this information item? Seeing none, we will move on, and that wraps up information items. Pardon me, Deputy Commissioner Robinson.
Mr. Chairman, just one, the last bullet under the fee approval process, we have, since May of last year, have been working to, I think, gather information from campuses regarding the approval process related to student-generated fees. And I think in May of last year, we had the Montperk fee and a significant discussion surrounding that particular fee. And I think as we've gathered the information, you know, it's an area that you know, I'm not sure that we have sort of an approved process on how we manage those particular fees. And you know, it might be athletic fee increase brought forward by the students. There certainly is some guidance that you will find in the constitution or bylaws of the student organizations, the student governments. But as it moves to the board, you know, the question would become, how does the campus CEO become involved or not become involved in that process as it would move forward to the board. And whether or not that is, whether or not the board is interested in the campus CEO taking a position on that, or if the student government position is sufficient to bring that to the board. So I'm not sure that the board has really provided the guidance to the campuses or to our office regarding how we handle those fees. And they're generally very rare, but we have had probably 2 or 3 examples of those in the last 3 or 4 years. Montpert, the sustainability fee, I think that came from MSU Bozeman a few years ago. So as we've tried to gather that information, and I think that was related to a question that you asked, Mr. Chair, in terms of, how do we manage those? We really do not have a set process for the campuses, and perhaps look for your guidance, the board's guidance, in terms of how we might move forward with those particular issues.
Thank you, Mick. Very appropriate, because we did have a lot of discussion in our Missoula meeting, or at least when it was talking about Montpert related to that. Thank you. All right, let's jump back up to the action item, item A, authorization to accept donation of property, Montana Tech. Chancellor Gilmore.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, our request today is that you accept, for the benefit of Montana Tech, 3 parcels. We've divided it into 3 parcels to make it a little simpler to explain. Parcel 1 is simply the property beneath the pillars or the columns that hold the arch. Should have been transferred at the time that the arch was transferred to the Board of Regents. They were not. But the foundation holds those still and would like to transfer them to the state so that we have all of the arch, including the things that hold it up. That's item parcel 1. Parcel 2 is 2 lots, and parcel 3 is a whole group of lots, all of which are just north of and just east of the property that you accepted from ARCO for Montana Tech. These lots have been donated to the foundation. The foundation would like to transfer them to Montana Tech or to the state, and we would rather have them as property that we hold than to convert them to money, although it would be difficult anyway where they're located to convert them to money of any substantial amount. And so the property is valuable. We have investigated. We can find no evidence of any mining activities on any of these lots, and obviously not under the pillars for the arch. And we cannot find where there are any historical items on these properties. So we would request that you consider accepting these on behalf of Montana Tech.
Comments or questions from members of the board? Chairman Christian.
To your last point, Chancellor Gilmore, to the best that we can, we've looked as far as environmental issues, and we're pretty comfortable that there are not any.
Mr. Chairman, Regent Christian, we cannot find where there's been any glory holes or anything of that nature on these lots. Vice Chancellor Johnson and I personally walked the lots. We cannot find any evidence of mining activity. It is just north of campus, just north of the new Natural Resources building on that hill.
Other questions, concerns, or comments? Regent Bornval.
Thank you. I was wondering about the maintenance of these properties. Are there increased costs associated with taking on these properties, or is it economies of scale and it's easily absorbed?
The only maintenance that we will need to do is weed control, and we have that with the ARCO property, which is just west of it.
My assumption is that once it was donated to the foundation, property taxes stopped being levied upon that because they're a 501c3, and that would probably stay the same. So we're not giving up
that has been an issue, although David Aronofsky, legal counsel for the university system, has indicated to me that under certain conditions we can get it removed from the tax rolls, but we have been paying taxes on this property. Or we, meaning the Montana Tech Foundation, has been paying. But it will automatically be removed if it's transferred to the Board of Regents on behalf of Montana Tech.
Other comments, questions? Seeing none, any comments, discussions from members of the audience? Great. If it's the will of the committee, do we see that it moves forward tomorrow for action? Seeing a nod of heads, it seems like we will. Thank you very much, Chancellor Gilmore. Moving on to the consent items. Is it the will of the committee to pull any items individually out of the consent agenda for discussion individually? Do I see the will of the committee to move this forward as a motion for tomorrow's action? Seeing again nod of heads, it looks like we will do that. That wraps up our agenda for discussion today with the Administrative Budget and Audit Oversight Committee. Any public comment related to items on this agenda? Again, any public comment? Seeing none, Chairman Christian, we wrap up our committee.
Exactly. Thank you, Regent Buchanan. As I mentioned before, then trying to return some students to our general meeting. We have some campus reports, or a campus report from the Western campus is the one that has been picked for today, and I believe his real name is Tyler Wines, but we've known him as Chicky now for about a year as the president of the Student Association at Western.
Regent Christian, Commissioner Stearns, board members, thank you for letting me speak. I'm not only speaking on behalf of Montana Western, but a quick recap of what MAS has been dealing with this past year. First of all, Regent Robinson, welcome to the board. We look forward to working with you throughout your term and excited, so thank you and welcome. As many of you guys have been, and everybody else in this room, MAS and the students have played a pivotal role in watching and participating in the legislative session up in Helena. We've had multiple days. We've had students up there. Big thank yous to our student lobbyist, Janelle Booth, on behalf of Montana Associated Students, and the other ones from Bozeman, Missoula, and Billings as well for really advocating for a system-wide approach on everything, and it's been beneficial to have that presence, and we look forward to that every session from here on out. We've testified in favor, as you guys are probably aware of, House Bill 2, House Bill 13, 280 with the student health care, and House Bill 249 with the bonding bill. So I guess we can get into a little more detail during our lunch, and I'll keep this brief. But our main point is on March 18th, MAS has organized a student lobby day for unique and innovative programs from across the system. We're really trying to key in on programs from each campus that really look at and apply to workforce and economic development that each campus can deliver towards the state and towards the economy and Montana's future. We're trying to just get one or two programs from each campus to address that, so we can let our legislators and the representatives see that as kind of what the Montana University system is doing towards workforce and economic development and being efficient and effective at the same time. Last night we did have our Regent candidate interviews. The board decided to go ahead with 3 recommendations, with Kayla Miller as ASMSUB president, Joe Thiel from Montana State University Bozeman, and myself from Montana Western. So we will be forwarding those on to the governor. Now really quick, I'll just kind of talk on Montana West. Or are there any questions for MAS or comments? Yes, Commissioner Stearns.
Tyler, it's hard to call you that. Just a congratulations to Janelle Booth and to all the student lobbyists. I join you on that. They have been an incredible help and very, frankly, sophisticated and hardworking in regard to their legislative strategy, and they're making a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Janelle and all the lobbyists. Anything we've done would not be possible without you guys, so thank you. So moving on now really quick towards our campus report. It's great to be a Montana Western student. It always has been, and it will continue to be. In the past few years, we've begun the experiential learning, as you guys are well aware, but instead of just an educational approach, that has become a lifestyle for the majority of our Montana Western students. I think subliminally, a lot of these students are going towards experiential learning even outside of their educational opportunities we give on the campus. A large majority of our students have independently and as groups started spearheading activities and issues that are the epitome of experiential learning and what they will be doing out in the job force. So it's kind of become second nature for our students, and it's paid off. It's tightened a gap between the community. It's been a huge networking opportunity for our students to get out there, and it's been nothing but beneficial. And within the years to come, it's going to be extremely exciting to see where block scheduling will lead us to. And at the same time, we are very concerned with, I'm preaching to the choir right now, if I may, about the budget coming down from the legislature, what it looks like now, and the impacts that might have on experiential learning on our campus. Our students have been very proactive in listing the pros and the cons and the strategic plan, which we are willing to do, and we've been working very tightly with our administration on how to keep all these opportunities. Really quick, in 2 weeks we will be having our research symposium, just where we will be broadcasting and showing all of these experiential learning opportunities our students have, a lot of research and just a lot of internships and kind of what epitomizes experiential learning for the Montana Western graduates. So that'll be going. Main Hall is going phenomenally well. It looks amazing. If you guys are ever in Southwest Montana, please stop by and look at it. It is from my 4th year here, or from this last semester, seeing the beauty and the history restored from what it was my first year. It's phenomenal. I never thought restoring a building could have such an impact on students' learning environments, having classes in there, and from what it is now, and just what it's going to do for our community is amazing. So we are working strongly to urge more funding to finish this for House Bill 249. I thank you for your time, and are there any questions, comments?
Questions or comments?
Thank you,
All right.
guys.
Thank you very much. Board members, then we will recess for lunch. We're having lunch with students. We will reconvene actually at 1 o'clock, but we will do so in executive session to discuss personnel matters, some building naming opportunities, and some litigation strategies. As presiding officer, have determined that the demands of the individual privacy in these particular matters clearly exceed the merits of the public disclosure. Therefore, this meeting will be closed, and the Regents will move to another location in executive portion of the meeting. Then we will reconvene at 2 o'clock for the open session in this room.